Hey guys, we're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about why art is so valuable, why art might be the missing piece in your life, and yeah, just some general insights. I think that art is a very fascinating area. It's a very beautiful sort of area of life, and I think although art is usually seen as something of a luxury, I would actually go ahead and say that I think art is actually sort of a necessity for a healthy mind and a healthy sense of self. I think that we actually need art in our life, and I'll go ahead to explain why, and I'll try to clear up some of what I feel like the confusions can be here. I feel like sometimes we can there are certain confusions we can have with art. Like one of them, for example, is that we can think of something like there are a few forms of art that we consider to be in the category. Like we might think of like music or filmmaking, writing, painting, especially visionary arts like painting, drawing, ceramics. We can see these creative outlets, and we can see them as art with really no difficulty. But then when it comes to something like baseball, or something like social dynamics or psychology, even computer science, we have a tendency to sort of we don't really notice how that can be an art form as well, and that there's actually an artistic component to basically any process of passion or any process of just like true interest, the pursuit of true interest in something. The creative pursuit itself to me is art. So we're not going to be coming at this from a fine arts angle of like just discussing a bunch of wanky topics about what good art is or not. Anything can be good art. Anything that you love, anything that you love to create, what your chosen form of creativity is, that is your art. So we'll say that right away as we get in, because it's funny when you start to see it like that. It's almost like sometimes when you clarify certain things for yourself and you're learning about things for yourself, you can kind of go about your life assuming that other people think the same way. And I've often been surprised to find that people don't think about art like that. They tend to categorize art as like a few things, but not necessarily a holistic sort of like art. To me is more of a process, is what I'm saying. So we'll just get that out of the way. So the first thing I want to talk about is what our most valuable currency is. If you just ask that question on a milk crate in the town square, most of the answers you'd probably get back to you are money. Right? Money is our most valuable currency. We go about life as if money is our most valuable currency. But I would actually contend that as well, and I would say that our most valuable currency is actually our attention. We are living in a time where there is a very intense competition occurring all the time and ubiquitously for our attention. Human beings have never had so much so much choice, and I actually think that that's a lot of where our chaos nowadays tends to ensue. We basically are exposed to so much information and so much choice that we don't really know how to handle it. We can go on Netflix, and that is a funnel in itself that we pay our attention to. But then when we're actually in Netflix, we don't know how to find something in Netflix that's going to entertain us. We go on Spotify and we can run through 100 songs or 100 artists in an hour, and we might just be searching for that thing that really titillates us or that really gives us what we want. Even social media, it's not just a matter of, I mean, for most people, I believe it's just a matter of just scrolling through social media pretty much mindlessly. But if we're actually using social media for something specific, like it's not like we have like one or two people to see. We have like, a bunch of people we do know, more people we don't know. And we can browse through not only different people, but different experiences in that person's life, right? And they might be artists as well. We can browse through different art they've created, different things they've made. And basically, we are inundated with so much choice that I feel like it makes it almost impossible for us to make the right decision most of the time. We are sort of drowning in this stuff. And then on top of that, on top of the widespread influx of the internet, smartphones being available to everyone, our attention being distributed in all these areas with all this information, we also have the general overwhelming information of our day-to-day life, and also how it's changing a lot more rapidly than it ever has before. Even if we just have something as simple as an office job, there are usually a multiplicity of skills that we have to learn in order to navigate the new world. It's not just about going to work, but for example, I'm pretty close with someone who works at a university, and it's interesting to notice how it's not just about going to work and to do your job, your role, but your role actually includes multiple elements, and some of them are actually new. And because a university setting is obviously very much on the front lines, you're exposed to a lot of information about cultural safety. You're exposed to a lot of information about workplace, like a harmonic workplace. You're exposed to a lot of information about how to make events run smoothly and how to network. And all these things make sense from a certain angle. I'm not in any way arguing against those things. Rather, I'm saying that there is so much information that comes in. And because we as human beings only have a certain amount of bandwidth on any given day, any given time really, if we're just sort of plugged into the system the way that the system runs, I feel like it can sometimes sort of burn us out naturally. And we see that a lot in people, don't we? We see that there's a lot of burnout. And it's almost like instead of being charged up by our work, and instead of actually being passionate about what we do and having deep interest, it seems like we're actually sort of drained a lot of the time by what we do. It seems like we're drained a lot of the time by our work. And it gets kind of confusing after a while, because if you're just bombarded with all this choice in and out of work, and you're trying to make even other, the other choices you end up making a lot of the time are actually choices to numb yourself because of how stressful and difficult this stuff can be, being so inundated with this choice and this information constantly. We might even turn to drugs or alcohol, frivolous sex, or like a pornography addiction, or any other form of addiction like that. Obviously, there are probably other deeper root causes and exiled parts within us that prompt those addictions. But on top of that, the added stress doesn't really allow us to be with ourselves past a certain point. And we could make a whole video talking about this, and maybe we will. But the reason I wanted to bring up currency here beforehand is that the way I've presented that information to you there can make it seem a little bit like a negative thing in our sort of modernist, our modern times, modernity. It can be a negative thing, because attention, if it's not funneled through choice and it's not funneled and governed through what we actually love to do, it does tend to just get funneled into what we're told is normal. The norms of our society and culture that our family and the systems in place sort of fit us and pigeonhole us into. So then we sort of just become agents of that. And then we wonder, why do people have midlife crises? Why is there this seeming mental health crisis? Why do people seem so burned out? Why are the rates of antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications and illicit drugs on the rise? Why is pornography viewed so constantly? Why is there lower social connection? And I think what we're actually seeing is the fallout of the fact that we are beings that are so much more than a simple survival system. We require at some level, once we have those survival needs met, if you've ever heard of or read into anything like Maslow's hierarchy, or even at a more complex level, a theory like spiral dynamics or the stages of ego development, what we begin to see in people is once the baser, more selfish needs for survival are met, there tend to be other needs that branch out, kind of like a tree. Once the root is actually set, there are other needs that sort of come to light. And this is where I think it can get quite tricky for us, and we don't actually really know how to meet those needs a lot of the time. So what happens is we kind of go in circles, and sometimes we can even think we just need more and more and more survival needs. Like we need more and more and more money, more sex, more and more of this, more of that, more pleasure. But when it actually comes down to it, we can run ourselves into the ground with this attitude, because we're not actually finding something that is deeply meaningful for us. We wake up in the morning with a certain level of attention, a certain level of energy for that day. And if all of that energy and attention is just funneled into things that are sort of take it or leave it, like deeply, they're not really meaningful for us, but we desperately feel like we need to do them to survive. This has become so normalized that sometimes we forget that this is not a very good recipe for well-being. This is not a very good recipe for happiness. You'll notice that if you are a creative person and you do actually have a creative interest, and it's something that has seeped its way into your everyday vocabulary, when you speak to people about this creative interest, there tends to be often a reaction of, wow, I wish that I was a creative person. Wow, I wish that I had an outlet like that. I wish I had something to do like that. And it's funny when you think about it like that, because it almost seems like the structure and the world we're in has led to people feeling like most of them are inherently not creative. And having a creative outlet or an art style or anything like that is sort of something that might be, resignated, like, yeah, a very small amount of people might have it. Maybe you're a creative person, but then I'm not a creative person. And as I said in the beginning of this video, I would actually contend that idea, and I would say, if you're passionate about something in your life, if there's something that you actually really love to create, particularly if you love to have impact on other people, you like to offer value to other people with your creativity, guys, that is a form of art. You have to understand that. For example, again, if you're a painter, like for me, for example, I'm a painter. I love to paint. I get a lot of value out of painting. And no one has trouble, really. I actually painted something for a woman yesterday, and I took it over to her office and we hung it up, and it was really nice. Like, I could tell she lit up when she received the painting. And I actually met her son, and I had like a really long conversation with him. I actually really like this guy. And we had a long conversation. I was sort of talking to him about my passion and the things that I really love to create. And then he was sort of mentioning back to me like, wow, like I don't really know what my thing is like that. But as we got more into conversation, we're kind of learning that he actually has a strong passion for real estate, for example. And I felt really moved by that. And we actually did speak about it, and he could kind of see that it's like, yeah, there's actually a lot of value that can be provided in people there by helping them secure a property. But it's funny because usually when we think about a deep interest in something like real estate, we'd think that's not art, but the painting totally is. They juxtapose one another, right? But no, actually you can totally be in the art of real estate. Really what, in my opinion, sort of takes something from an interest to an art form is when you spend enough time with something that you're sort of on the path of mastery with it, and you actually love what that is, and you love the ever-growing process of that interest. It's an interest that has a route of growth and that you're expressing yourself through, right? Another way of looking at art that I really like is art is kind of like the bridge from the soul to here, right? To what we do in the physical world. Without getting too metaphysical and abstract about that, I'm not really trying to do that in this video. What I'm saying to you is that oftentimes with amazing artists, we'll know that there is something that seems to move through their psyche in a way. Like even musicians do this a lot. I'm a big fan of music, and some of my favorite musicians, a lot of their music is like, you'll hear it and it might not really be that direct. Like for example, Kings of Leon, some of their songs are actually so beautiful, but they don't really come across as that coherent, and that's because the music is coming out in the form of poetry. So the way that it's actually structured into lyrics is there is a sort of a symbolic equivalence, it's like that is the meaning that he brings through, but you can still feel that, and we can actually draw off of the emotion and the energy of that music as if it was a coherent structure. And then there's also another way of seeing it where we might actually feel two different ways. Like if you're really into music, sometimes you can share a song with someone and they might say, wow, this song makes me feel that. And I might think, wow, I never felt sad listening to that. It was always uplifting to me. And that's really just one of the myriad ways that art can affect us in a really meaningful, deep, beautiful way. Is that it's the interpretation of art. Like I like to go to galleries with people, and sometimes you'll just notice like, wow, like we have totally different interpretations, or we can. And it's also fun to share our interpretations. But that can be the exact same thing with the real estate, right? If you really like your craft, and you really enjoy what you're doing, you can take it to the level of art. And so to tie some of this together, I think really now that our attention can so easily be funneled into these areas, I mean, it's kind of just expected that your attention would be funneled into certain areas nowadays. Because our attention is essentially vulnerable, it is really important for people to have an art form. So my question to you, the thing that I'd really be curious about with you is, and I'd like to hear this, I'd like you to actually comment this and let me know what this is, I'm interested. What is your art form? What is your craft? So maybe you actually have something and you're not a painter or a musician, you don't have a traditional art, but maybe you actually love to do something, and before you watch this, maybe you hadn't had someone explain it like that, or maybe you actually don't even, maybe it's like almost like a completely private thing. And this can actually be really broad, like, and some other examples of this that people might not consider art, but they actually may be living the life of an artist in a lot of ways, are bodybuilding, journaling, even like wakeboarding, or myriad sports, different kinds of sports. When you're actually focused on that sport and you're looking to improve, and particularly when art becomes, in my opinion, like really incredible, and that's why you're watching this video right now, is when you can actually share what you love with other people and you can add value to people's lives. That's when like there's another element of art. There's the teaching element and the sharing element, which is just incredible. There's like an old Buddhist saying I really like, where the Buddhist says that a candle doesn't diminish from sharing its flame. And that's totally true. The sort of love that you have for what you do, when you share it out to other people, it only basically creates more of that love, if it is true love, for what you do. If you have a scarcity mindset and you feel like you have to guard and defend your art, there's probably indication that there's a little bit of trauma there, or you feel overly protective about this thing. You don't actually want to share it out. Great art starts a fire because other people are inspired by it, right? How many times do you think someone's ready to... People who write great novels, how many great novels do you think they've read, that have all come together to create that coherent system where they could actually think like that and create like that? So that's my first question to you here, is that what is your art form? Do you not have an art form? Do you have something that you didn't know was an art form, or do you have an art form that you already knew was an art form and you're looking to breathe that into existence more? I'd love to actually see some of that. I actually love to look through the Reddit art page, and it's more traditional art usually, but you'll see on Reddit, some people just create some incredible things. In fact, I saw this woman yesterday create something, digital art, and she created like it was a digital art picture of like a manatee that had like a salmon skin roll, like a sushi. It was like a manatee sushi roll. But the way she created this, I was sharing it with my friend. It's just a beautiful piece of art. Really, really cool. And it's sort of wove different, because it's obviously like the sushi, and then the manatee is like a sea creature, so it like blends together. But the way it was all portioned and positioned and colored, the way it had this kind of childlike, buoyant energy to it, was really awesome. And that's kind of one of the best things about art as well, is when you're actually an artist yourself, you can look at other people's art with a lot of appreciation. A lot of the time. So yeah, what is your art form? What do you love to do like that? The other thing I want to talk about, not to take it in too negative a direction, but I actually wanted to talk a little bit about what can happen if we don't have art, in my opinion. I think basically what happens if we funnel our attention into all these areas that we don't really care about, and we don't actually have a thing we're really passionate about, or maybe a lot of the time we did have a thing we were quite passionate about. We grew up with something that we were interested in and that sparked us at an early age. But our parents or our teachers or our peer group, our culture basically sort of forced us to have to exile that part of us. We had to bury that part of us deep down because we felt as though it wasn't really welcome in how we grew up, and we had to take up something else instead that we didn't care about. So maybe there is actually a latent passion or a latent art form that started to develop in your youth for you, but it's buried under so many layers of conditioning, and just to the point where it's completely unconscious. That can happen for a lot of people. Even sometimes we can just be having a conversation with our parents or a family member or like an old friend, and they can say, hey, remember when you used to, and you know, you can have some of those moments where you reminisce and you're like, holy fuck, yeah, I did, yeah, I loved that. And it can just escape us. But what is actually happening when our attention just gets sort of funneled out into myriad different areas, but we don't actually have something focusing on it? Because that's really also what a craft and what art is about. It's about the focused use of attention. When that attention is focused into that beautiful form that you're seeking to vivify, again, you're connecting your soul to the form, the substance to the structure. When you're actually vivifying that form, it teaches you so much about who you are. It teaches you so much about your latent creative powers and what you're willing to do to create something magical, what it feels like to share something high quality with another person. I actually get a little bit emotional even talking about it because I really love doing that. Even making these videos, to me right now, I feel like I'm in a flow state and I'm just enjoying speaking to you. I'm enjoying actually just speaking from this place in me that uses so much time studying these different things and getting coaching myself and actually having difficult moments knowing what I'm doing and then being able to synthesize that into a coherent speech, coherent enough for speech, and speak it out to you brings me a lot of joy. So yeah, on top of that, it brings you joy. Art is a way that you can find joy in a very natural way. You don't need to be high as fuck. You don't need to be high at all. You don't need anything. You just need you and the time to express that art. Some of us actually do have art forms that we know we like, but we actually feel like we're not allowed to have them. That is a travesty. That is a sin, basically. I'm not in like a condemning way. It's not probably your fault at all. There's probably a sense inside of you that you're not actually allowed to invest that much time into your art. You have too many other things to do. And this is one of the saddest things, I think, that can happen in human beings, because we are such incredible creative, like if half the human population could tap into their latent creative powers and get into those flow states, man, we would have, anyway, not to get too Aldous Huxley, we can have a conversation about that another time for sure. Anyway, what can happen a lot of the time is if our attention just gets funneled into these areas that we feel like we need to do but we don't actually give a shit about, is as we grow we can get into a sense of feeling very insubstantial in ourselves. There can be a sense of, yeah, we might actually have we might be functional or effective in a lot of ways, but we don't have that deep sense of actually feeling like we know who we are as people. We don't really know what is meaningful to us in life. We haven't really went on the hero's journey. A lot of art is going on the hero's journey. If you've ever read that book or you've heard that theory by Joseph Campbell, a lot of the time, pretty much all the time, the hero tends to avoid the call to action. Every hero story, the most important hero being you, every hero story starts with the hero avoiding the call to action. And then gradually over time, he heeds the call. But then as he goes on the journey, as she goes on the journey, the hero encounters all sorts of what Campbell calls threshold guardians. And the threshold guardians along the way, they can be like, our distractions and whatnot. When we're just sort of putting into these distractions endlessly, we grow along life and we grow up like normal people, but we grow having to repress what we really want to do. And those latent desires actually manifest anyway into reality. They show themselves through our dreams and through the forms of nightmares, or even positive dreams that contain symbols that have that information. Or maybe it comes through our health. Maybe only when we have a serious health condition and we're actually close to death do we recognize, oh my God, I never really did anything I loved, even though I might have quite a bit of money or not much money, even though I may have all the things that everyone told me I needed, I don't really know what I wanted to do with my life. If you contemplate that, that's quite horrifying. That's actually something I've done that has caused me to make radical decisions that most people will not make. I've walked out of jobs, I've walked out of relationships, I've walked out of lots of situations and followed what's most meaningful to me. And what's funny is everyone who does that, there's always a sense that if you stay true to yourself, there is always another side. But we're so scared of doing that because there's a collective sort of dogma and ideology, isn't there? That it's like, no, you need to do these things because if you don't, and you start feeling that energy in you, and it's like, okay, what is that part of me trying to communicate? Where is all that fear coming from? So yeah, basically not having a path of artistry is an unexamined sense of self usually. It's a life lived where you may have what you need, but you don't really have what you want. And over time, those things start to merge into one anyway, I think. Because as we said earlier, when the basic needs are met, there are higher, more complex needs that do start to come to light and start to want our attention. And we don't often have a strong sense of what these things really are or valuing these things enough in our culture, at least that I see. So hopefully this actually gives you a bit of insight into why art is actually more valuable than ever, why we need to pursue art, why we need a form of or forms of art. These are just some thoughts, but I really hope that you got value out of this. If you do get value out of it, please subscribe, help me grow the channel up, like the video, share this if you feel like someone could get value out of it. And again, comment. I want to hear about what you guys love to create. When do you feel you're most creative? Maybe you just love that real estate thing. Maybe you're a painter. Maybe you're really into music. Maybe you're into personal development, bodybuilding, whatever it is. I'd like to know. But yeah, there are some thoughts about why I feel like we need art more than ever. And yeah, I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.